guess I will start us off by saying this is Fire Emblem 4, Genealogy the Holy War. And returning once more because he is forever here is Jacob.
Hello.
And alongside him is person who this is going to be the first time you're hearing her voice, but not the first time she's recorded, Reya.
Hello. How is everyone?
Doing good.
So, anyways, Fire Emblem 4, Genealogy the Holy War. Actually, no, before we get into that, Reya, is there anything you'd like to introduce about yourself before we get started? Forgot to give you the chance to do that.
Oh, no, there's nothing special about me.
Okay, if you're sure.
Yeah.
And now we'll talk about Genealogy the Holy War. That thing that we came here to talk about. So, when was the first time you guys played this game?
I played this back in, I want to say 2014, with one of the older translations, back after I played Awakening.
Was this pre-Naga, or were you using Naga?
This was before Project Naga. This was one of the
Actually, I
older
guess that makes sense, because
translations.
Naga is pretty much the most recent one we have. Still,
Yeah,
so.
Project Naga was in 2016, though, so it's not that recent, but it's more recent than when I started playing it.
And I played it when Project Naga came out. So that was...
Alright.
Oh, yeah, an interesting fact. That was like my fourth Fire Emblem game I ever played, too.
Hey, that works!
Yeah. I was a complete novice coming off of... I played first Fates, then Awakening, then I played Sacred Stones, and then I randomly decided to play FE4.
Quite a bit
That's
of
an
courage
interesting
coming
order.
off of those three.
But hey, you made it work.
I had no idea what I was doing.
Truly the best strategy. No idea what you're doing.
Especially going into FE4, of all games. The one where child units matter the most.
Oh boy. I can only imagine how that first playthrough went.
FE4 has so many strange mechanics, like, in it. Like, I was, like, not prepared at all.
You guys want to talk a little bit about those mechanics. What threw you off the most?
For me, it was the money and the weapons. Like, how you couldn't trade at all. Like, unless the units were, like, paired. Like, married. You could trade money between them. And then thieves could also steal money. But, like, I didn't understand that, like, you couldn't give weapons unless you sold it off to the pawn shop. And then you have to re-buy it if you want to trade, like, to other people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really weird.
I guess I could expand upon that a little bit, and I'm probably going to have to get into programming terms, so if Deku wants to step in and help me explain it, that would be nice. Basically what
So
happened...
that's why you wanted me here.
Part of why. Another reason is because I don't really...
Yeah, that's fair.
Part of, like, every other Fire Emblem game, basically whenever you buy an item, like, an iron sword, it's basically its own sort of, like, thing. It's just copy and paste it. It's, like, not really a thing. It's just kind of there. It's like, oh, this character has an item sword. It's, like, empty data. But in FE4, every item that exists in the game and every weapon is kind of its own individual entity. Like, you don't just copy and paste an iron sword. The different iron swords are, like, individually programmed entities that have their own unique status and sort of history that the game tracks as you go along. And this is why inheritance is such a big... This is part of the big sort of focus on inheritance, is because each weapon is actually unique. And this is made there. It's made even more unique because of the lack of trading, which means usually the only way to get them off is through a really convoluted process or through inheritance. And I know why they did this is because they wanted each item to have sort of a sense of history attached to it.
Mm-hmm. That's something I think... Yeah.
Even if an item isn't inherited, which can happen with a few items, I know Thoron is the one that can, like, never be inherited, but those items will still show up in enemy hands in Gen 2, and they will still have all the data that they had whenever they were used to be used by the Gen 1 units.
That's actually really cool. I had no idea.
Yeah.
And does that have to also deal with the kill, like the crit stat thing with 50 kills on one weapon?
Yeah, basically, to explain that, Critical hits in Fire Emblem 4 don't just happen randomly. Well, they do just happen randomly, but you cannot normally get a critical hit unless you're using a weapon with a critical skill on it. Normally, the only weapons that have the critical skill that enable critical hits are Mistletoe, which is a legendary weapon, which is tied specifically only to one character in Gen 2, at least that you can use, and the Killer Bow. Normally, all of their weapons don't have critical, but after a weapon kills 50 enemies, it will gain critical permanently, even whenever it leaves your inventory, like I explained before.
Yeah, I think that's something they could really do something cool with in the eventual remake that's definitely going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the FE4 remake is pretty much eventual at this point.
Yeah. Like maybe do something like with EVs in Pokemon, where like the more of a certain kind of enemy you kill with this weapon, you might get, say, Axe Breaker on it if you kill enough Axe units.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be real cool.
Another thing on that note is that not only are critical hits something that only happen to have a certain skill, the ability to make follow-up attacks is also tied to a skill. A unit can normally only ever attack once, unless they have follow-up normally. Now, there's a couple other skills like Adept that kind of work around this, but follow-up is the skill that kind of enables follow-ups. Follow-up enables follow-ups, critical enables critical hits. Kind of simple whenever you put it, like whenever you notice the skill names. Although a lot of the old translations call follow-up Pursuit, and I think even Project Naga does this.
Yeah, I think Finn does that.
Yeah, that's the two big skills off the top of my head. Fire Emblem 4 otherwise plays very similarly to later Fire Emblem. Oh, wait. Weapon levels. That's the other big difference. Should I explain Holy Blood now? Or do we want to wait until we get into the storyline? Because
this is probably a good time for it.
Okay. So weapon levels in Fire Emblem 4 also work differently from previous and later games, because weapon skills are some levels that are something that are inherent. If you have a B rank, you're always going to have a B rank. You can't level it up by continually using a sword to level up from like level B in a swords to level A in swords. So if you have a B rank, you're always going to have it. The only way that you can increase weapon levels in Fire Emblem 4 is whenever you promote a unit, they will get a set increase in their ranks. Otherwise, the weapon levels never go up. So basically, if a unit is limited to using a C in weapons, they're only ever going to be using a C swords.
Oh, that's nice.
Unless they promote, of course.
Oh, yeah.
Now, the thing that kind of throws us off and is a lot more relevant for Gen 2 and kind of plays into how you have to play the game with the children mechanic, which is the central part of the game we'll get into in a bit, is Holy Blood. Depending on what Holy Blood you'll have what is basically an S rank in a weapon, or an S level, sorry. Basically an S level in a weapon. It'll be marked by a star. And this basically means that you will always be able to use any weapon type in that category if you have the correct Holy Blood. And this is normally locked to Major Holy Blood. So Holy Blood also affects your growth rates. If you have a Major Holy Blood, you'll get a better growth rate in certain stats depending on what Holy Blood it is. And obviously you'll have a proficiency towards certain weapon types. But aside from that, interestingly, the only way that you can ever use A rank light magic tomes is to have Major Naga Holy Blood.
Oh, so Julia.
So only Deirdre and Julia can ever actually use the A rank light magic tomes.
No one could use dark magic, right?
Who can use what?
No one could use dark magic in this game, right?
Yeah, that is true. No playable unit can use dark magic. In this game, unlike Thracia Onward for the most part, dark magic exists in this game, but is limited to enemy units. This is also kind of the case with the first three games, but the remakes of the first three games changed this to give playable dark magic in certain instances.
Oh, okay. Since we're talking about mechanics, how about we also mention that the weapon triangle, I think, started with this game.
Yes, it did. The weapon triangle started with this, which is also funny because in Gen 1, you only get one unit who can use axes at all. And in Gen 2, I think you only get like 3 units if you count life. Oh, well, you get 2 in Gen 1 if you count Lachesis.
Oh,
But yeah, a lot
massive.
of the series mechanics that are kind of staples of everything, I affectionately refer to Genealogy of the Holy War as the game where they started to realize what the hell they wanted to do with this franchise.
Yeah.
This is where a lot of the sort of staple mechanics like the weapon triangle and a lot of the promotion lines, even Swordmasters got their start here. They're like their proper start here.
Yep.
Swordmasters and Myrmidons. And this is also the first game with a skill system at all. This is where the skills debuted. And a lot of the skills in Genealogy of the Holy War, like the majority of them, went on to become series staples. So like Saw, Luna, Astra, Nihil, which appeared later in Tellius, and Heroes. And Heroes is called the Null skill. Then there's Renewal, which also debuted here, Miracle. Generally, most of the skills in Fire Emblem 4 appeared in the majority of other games that have a skill system, and you probably will recognize most of them. In general, it really did sort of codify what FE was starting to be, although it didn't codify it solidly enough until Binding Blade. This is also, we kind of see a proto-support system in FE4. Instead of being able to increase support points, you increase love points between units that are opposite gender. And once their love points hit a certain rank, they will instantly marry each other. This is important in Gen 1 for the next mechanic we're going to talk about, but you can also increase love points by having these pre-designated conversations, and these conversations are sort of structured like support conversations. They only happen at very specific times, and basically you can't really do these at any time, and they aren't really properly tied to support levels. Like, some people can have a combo and never have it again, and sometimes you'll get items out of these combos, but otherwise it's very, very similar to support conversations with how they work, but it's kind of in a more janky form.
Yeah.
Anything you'd want to add?
No, I don't really have anything. Like, when I first played the game, like, the support conversations also really confused me, like, how it works.
Yeah,
I think they're standing next to each other.
Yeah, basically what happens whenever you're increasing love points, okay, how this works is whenever any unit is on a map with a unit they are compatible with, able to fall in love with, they will automatically increase support points. They have different units have different growths. If you have them stand next to each other, you'll get more love points, except with Finn and 2 other units, they actually get less support points with by standing next to each other, which is weird.
Oh my God.
Otherwise, it kind of works the same as growing supports in the Game Boy Advance games and Echoes and Three Houses, where you kind of have 2 units stand next to each other and they grow. Now, the talk conversations are a lot more complex. Fire Emblem 4, and to a arguably bigger extent, Thracia, you kind of have to go in knowing what you're doing if you really want to do well at this game. Because the support conversations have a lot of very specific requirements you have to meet, like, Ira has to not have fallen in love with these 2 units and has to be eligible for this type of weapon, or, Dew has to do this kind of thing before seizing the castle, then has to do this after seizing the castle to be eligible for this conversation. Basically, there's a lot of really convoluted requirements for these conversations, but if you do actually manage to unlock them, you just kind of have a unit go up to another unit and the talk command, which is a lot like support conversations work later.
I feel like I need a subsequent playthrough now that I know more about FE.
Oh yeah, I had an entire guide on Genealogy the Holy War I created, but it's not very detailed, but it's got all the information on there. It's just not very pretty.
That would help a lot. Maybe I should try it again.
So
They totally should.
Hmm?
Yeah, I was just saying that you totally should.
Yeah. I guess that brings us to the sort of meat and potatoes of genealogy, which is the children system. They would later bring this back in Awakening and Fates. In genealogy, this is where that system got its start. It's only really appeared in 3 Fire Emblem games, though. Basically, Genealogy the Holy War's main story is divided into 2 generations, Generation 1 and Generation 2. With the exception of Finn, they are completely separate casts. And Finn can kind of carry over his stuff from Gen 1 and Gen 2 if he doesn't get married between games. Between gens, rather. What happens is a certain spoiler event, I guess we should call it, happens at the end of Gen 1.
I wonder if it's really a spoiler with heroes and everything.
It's not really a spoiler anymore.
I mean, it kind of is, but if you haven't played Heroes...
Yeah.
I mean, I guess, yeah, but most people, I'm going to guess, have played Heroes at this point.
Okay, so basically a certain event happens at the end of Gen 1, that, which is Chapter 5, and then at the start of Chapter 6, Gen 2 begins with the new cast. What happens is this new cast is populated by the children of characters that you had marry in Gen 1. Children characters are tied to the mother, and how this will usually work, with 2 exceptions, is that the father will pass things down to the son, and the mother will pass things down to the daughter. With 2 exceptions, Leif and Nana... No, not Leif and Nana. Leif and Altina are an exception to this, because their inheritance is reversed. And I believe Bridges' inheritance was reversed as well. But this is also pretty much the only way you're going to get most of the holy weapons in Gen 2 is if you got them in the first generation and then married off the parents that have holy weapons to pass them down to the children. It's very, very reliant. The entire game is very, very on the inheritance system. And basically, you can go one of 2 ways. Either Gen 2 can be really easy if you did a really good inheritance job, or it can be absolutely miserable if you did a bad inheritance job. Every mother in Gen 1, every female character, has the potential to become a mother. So whenever you marry them off successfully in Gen 1 and either of the parents die, this can lead to a child being born in Gen 2. And these are the main thing you populate your army with. This is sort of the central mechanic. And basically what happens is the entire inventory of the parents and their gold, in Final Genealogy the Holy War, gold is tied to each unit individually, is passed down to the child unit. I'm not really sure where to go from there. Oh, also the holy bloods of the parents are sort of combined in the children. So you have to pay attention to what holy blood you want on the kids.
I think we can transition to substitute units as well. Like, one thing that I really loved about this game was how important, like, each child was. That they had to have, like, a substitute character for each child. And, like, so I ended up with a lot of substitutes because I didn't know what I was doing for support. So,
yeah, basically... The substitutes in general don't have a lot of really story relevance to them. If you do get them, bottom line is the substitutes are basically the child characters, but worse.
Yeah.
They're cousins.
This is true for one set, but not the rest of them.
I thought it was most of them. Okay. I still haven't played the game, just a reminder. For all, I'm assuming, like 20 of you watching at home.
Yeah, I think the only case this is true is with Hawk and Lind. Yeah, Hawk and Lind.
Is it Ray? Did it sound like you were about to go somewhere a minute ago?
Oh, I was thinking, like, since if we're done with the child topic, we could transition to maps.
The maps.
Yeah.
Yeah, another major way that Genealogy the Holy War is sort of differentiated from the other games is every chapter. There's only like 12 chapters in this game, but each chapter is sort of the length of 3 normal Fire Emblem chapters. These are really massive chapters. They have multiple maps, multiple castles you have to seize, which normally is the objective of a single map in another Fire Emblem game. and generally you have to move across the map in a single go. Like, these are basically 3 chapters that are stitched together in genealogy. And this is kind of the approach they have for the entire game. This is kind of divisive.
Like, so for example, like for me, like I really enjoyed like the large maps. Like I felt more immersed in the story. I felt like because a lot of things were happening, like, and it's like this huge area, and you have to travel like to each castle, and like the story is happening while you're traveling. Like I really enjoyed it.
What's also really neat about the maps is that if you stitch all 12 of the maps together, you actually have the entire continent of Jug.
Yeah, I saw that someone stitched it together.
Yeah, so basically one map will be like an entire country.
Yeah, it's really well done. Like I didn't know that people didn't like it, honestly.
Yeah, the main issue is moving infantry and armored units around, because really, unless you have these special staves that allow you to teleport units around, moving them around tends to be a hassle. Which is also a shame, because you get things like Sed, who is a really, really amazing who just has to be lugged around, basically.
Yeah. Horse emblem.
Yeah, that's what most people call this.
What do you guys think are the best parts of this game? What do you think are the parts that really stand out the most that make you enjoy the game?
I would definitely say the story. This is the only Fire Emblem game. Three Houses tried this later, but not to the same extent. But this is the only Fire Emblem game that tells a protracted story over several decades. And this is a really good approach, sort of, that really immerses you, because this is a Fire Emblem that doesn't take place over like the 1 or 2 years that the other games do. This is this sort of grand epic that takes place over like 30 years.
I feel also the same as Jacob. Oh, yeah, Jacob, did you have more to say? Did you have more to say?
Yeah. The lore of this story, Fire Emblem 4 is also where a lot of the lore of the Fire Emblem series at large started to really crop up. The most significant things being, this is where brands got their start, and the general concept of Holy Blood, as well as Naga's larger significance to the series as a whole as we go. Although she kind of did dip out between the GBA games and Tellius. We also get generally a deeper look at the understanding of this world. And Jugdral has a lot of really good world building for a game that doesn't have supports. You can generally get an idea of most characters and their motivations and sort of their backstory just from all the random convos and events that happen, which is really, really impressive for a game without supports, because normally most of these characters would be on the wayside without supports, usually very quiet. But this is not the case for Genealogy, where most units tend to continue to be relevant thanks to the conversations that happen on the different maps. And also, you kind of get an understanding of the world at large if you pay attention, which is also really nice and impressive without supports to do that, because normally you'd see supports do this.
Speaking of really well-rounded out characters, who's your guys' favorites in this game? Who really stood out to you?
I'm just waiting. I'm just waiting for her to decide one.
Oh, yeah. Do you want to go first? Okay, I'll go first. Okay, so I am very generic. So I love Sigurd, Quan, and Finn the most. I also okay. So Sigurd, like, the way that his story just goes, like, oh wait, are we supposed to be talking about spoilers or no?
I think that it's fine to talk about spoilers in a 30th anniversary discussion.
Just put a timestamp if people really care about it, I guess, Deku.
Oh yeah, spoilers.
I guess just put a timestamp in the video to when they're done.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. We'll see if I don't feel like doing that, I'll just edit out the part where you say that and just keep in the part where I say spoilers.
Yeah. I just really love, like, how Sigurd's story, like, when I went into this game, like it felt like generic, at first, like like he's just the knight that wants to help however he can, and like seeing his story go, like, the way that events play out, like it feels almost like a reverse, like of a hero story, because like the fate
He
that he meets at the end
he,
is just
he tries to
so
do everything he can, but he just gets fucked up the ass every step of the way.
exactly, like it's like the world is just completely against him. Like every good thing he does is just met with such tragedy, and like it's just heartbreaking seeing him, like how it ends for him, and then seeing Seliph like come in and like become triumphant at the end of the game. Like it was so fulfilling. Like finally seeing like things play out well for these characters. But oh my goodness, like oh, I'll talk about a minor character that I like. Tailsu.
Oh yes,
Oh my
I
goodness,
haven't
like
even, I haven't played the game, but Heroes has made me fall in love with Tailtew.
And of course, she has to be the character with the most, the single most fucked up way to go.
it's
Yeah,
awful. It's heartbreaking. Like I could not believe like how dark this story got. Like it was like just wow, it was like whiplash. Like going into this story, like oh goodness, like the minor characters had awful things happen. The major characters, and I just loved those characters that much more because of the tragedies and the things that they had to go through, and seeing their children like rise above that tragedy and finally like make it through, and just oh goodness, it was just so good.
It
Okay.
may or may not come as a surprise to most people on that note. May or may not. Three Houses also tried to tell a really dark storyline, and the developers said they specifically wanted to emulate Genealogy the War with a lot of these story beats and generally how they presented the story in Three Houses. And in general, I think Three Houses really does a really nice job of sort of emulating the Jugdral style, which Awakening and Fates didn't really have.
Yeah, I think that might be a reason that I love Three Houses as much as I did as well. Like, oh yeah, like Arvis, for example, like I really, really disliked him at first, but really seeing his story play out, like I could feel like sympathy, or like at least like understand like why he did the things he did, which
Can we
I really
discuss Three Houses
admire.
spoilers here, Deku?
fine. Raya, you played Three Houses, yeah?
Of course.
Yeah, an
Cool.
interesting thing is that Edelgard and Arvis actually have the same epithet in the Japanese version of the Flame Emperor.
Yeah.
And another interesting thing is that Edelgard's learn set for her spells is actually pretty insane, but the notable thing is that she learns just about every dark magic spell, but notably, I think literally every fire magic spell in the game. It is very, very clear who Edelgard is supposed to be an XP of whenever you take those into consideration. Arvis.
But yeah, so I really enjoyed the story, the characters, and I really loved the map design. So,
For me, I would probably have to say my favorite characters are the Gen 2 cast. And I don't know if I'm in the minority or not this, but Ced, Leif, and to an extent Seliph, I actually really enjoy their characters. I feel like Seliph is Lucina, but done slightly better. Well, I guess technically Lucina's a worse Seliph, but that's the thing. And that's probably a hot take. But yeah, I really like how Seliph's storyline progresses, and I generally like his outlook on things. But in general, and I probably touched on this in my FE5 video, but a lot of the character struggles Leif has in that game expands upon are already present here in FE4, just to a lesser extent because Leif is sort of a side character in this game. But FE4 generally has a lot of good narratives for their characters, which again is really good and impressive for a game that doesn't have support, because normally you would see these happen in support conversations.
What do you guys think were the weaker parts of the game?
I feel like maybe just antiquated mechanics, but that might just be because I didn't know like how things work.
I honestly don't even think the mechanics are antiquated, aside from they're just kind of slightly different. But a lot of the mechanics are very similar to what you'll find in later Fire Emblem games. Most of the skills return in later games. You'll be hard pressed to find a skill in Genealogy that doesn't return in a later game, or even as a series staple. Most of the classes, for the most part, will be familiar promotions like Fighter to Warrior, Myrmidon to Swordmaster, etc. Um, I feel like my main flaw with this game is something a lot of people have, which is moving infantry units across the maps. There really should be a method, if they remake this game, to make infantry units able to move across the map more efficiently. Maybe they could do this with rescue and having cavalry and flyer units ferry them across the battlefield, or maybe this could be some other kind of mechanic. But that's probably my main flaw with this game is infantry. And I think support still could have helped this game, even though I think the conversations do a fantastic job of helping fill in that gap with supports, which is something you don't often see in the first 5 games.
Yeah. For me, it's just the gold. I feel like you should be able to either have a universal like gold pot, or if you could trade between all the units. But at the same time, like my main gripe was with the weapons, and Jacob really explained it really well, like how the weapons are each unique in this
So
game.
maybe
So
if they
like
explained a little bit more about why the weapons were the way they were, and just kind of showed their philosophy behind the game design a little bit more in the game itself.
I wonder how they would really show that in the game though. Like
Yeah.
just hearing his explanation though made me about it.
Another thing with gold is segregated for the same way, but that's why thieves and rogues exist, because the main purpose of thieves and rogues on the battlefield is every time they attack an enemy, they steal a certain amount of gold from that enemy, and basically they can very easily rack up their gold because every strike they have likely drains that enemy's pocket. And what can happen is that any rogue or thief can then deposit gold to any other unit. So basically, thieves and rogues act as your main source of cash to distribution.
I was wondering, can they transfer like money from one unit to another though, or is it just from an enemy to a unit?
Okay, basically what happens is when a thief attacks a unit, they steal all the gold, and then thief/rogue can go up to another unit and just dump all their money, and then go up and fill up on more.
Okay.
You can also get more gold with the thief sword, but this is only something that kind of exists for Lachesis if you're going to sell it. That's a weapon. But it has the same effect of just filling your pockets like you would if you were a thief. It's also a really bad sword. Its main purpose is literally just to get gold. It's otherwise useless in combat.
You guys have any more major talking points you want to cover, or are we about to wind down?
We covered story. We covered the main mechanics. Anything I'm missing?
I can't think of anything. Like we talked about weapon triangle, inheritance. Oh,
I guess overall, this is just a really important game to Fire Emblem as a whole, because this is kind of comparable to A Link to the Past in the sense, because A Link to the Past was where Zelda started to figure out what they were doing, but they weren't quite there yet, arguably. Fire Emblem 4 is kind of comparable in the sense that they're kind of getting an idea of what they're doing, but they aren't quite there, then they wouldn't quite be there until Binding Blade happened. And also the lore of Genealogy the Holy War would become really important in later games. Even in the remakes, brands are kind of really important in Echoes, even though they weren't really a factor in the original Gaiden.
All right, then should we get moving towards the rankings then?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
All right, well, what do you guys rate this game?
Well, I would say this is a game that only really has a few flaws with it. It's mainly held back by a bit of its age, but I'm not sure if that's significant enough to really knock it down a few pegs. What I would say is probably an A, and maybe it can dip into an S- if I want to be really generous with this, because I would definitely say this is one of the top 6 FE games.
And I am completely enamored with the story and characters of this game, and that's what I mainly play FE for. So I would also say, like, I would give it an S.
All right, so we'll kind of lean on the edge of then this being an A plus S minus situation.
Yeah, I would say A+. I feel like a remake does have some flaws that they could fix out, and there's a couple of confusing things in the story whenever you try to consider it for the larger lore. I'm sure YMCAN has talked your ear off about them. There's some questions that kind of need to be answered that I feel like an Echoes or a remake of this could address, but they're small enough that I don't think it impacts FE4 itself. It's only whenever you try to consider it in the larger context they have questions. And they aren't really big questions either. They're kind of minor things.
All right, then. Well, there you go. Really good game, apparently. I should play it eventually.
Eventually,
Probably.
being the keyword.
I definitely need to read now that I know more.